Hi there, I'm Jake. Welcome to the Blind Eternities Tavern. Today, I want to talk about house rules. And I know frequently house rules are seen in kind of a negative light because they tend to take the form of a long laundry list of complaints by whoever authored them. But today I want to propose a different approach and talk about the way that we've developed our house rules for my circle of friends. So pull up a chair and have a seat at the table, and whether you're a button mash hack and slash controller bash or a meeple moving mastermind of maps, mats, and minis, if you ruffle at the awful ruffle shuffle scuffle, or if you're a click clack pick attack number ball luck sack, we're all here for the same reason. I'm Jake. Let's talk games. So let's begin with the wrong way to make house rules. Because I think a lot of times when we see house rules in different areas, it's because somebody had a specific archetype or a specific card that stood out to them as being particularly broken. And over time, this can grow to a long list of commanders and specific cards that you are not allowed to use, artificially constraining the gameplay at the table. This leads to decks that are built specifically to counter certain strategies that are left over, which can lead to further imbalance. If you completely remove counterspells from the game, you're going to see combo decks take over. And then if you remove infinite combos from the game, you're going to see mid-rangey decks and grindy decks take over. And ultimately, once everything is banned, you are all playing with battlecruiser magic, and you've artificially lowered the ceiling to what would be a bracket 2 deck. And I think we can do a lot better in the way that we manage these house rules to apply at every level. The way we do that is that we stay out of the mechanical and structural rules of the game. Typically, house rules shouldn't apply to the way that you construct your deck or the archetypes that you are allowed or disallowed from including. People should have the freedom to solve that puzzle of deck building on their own. Additionally, I think our house rules should stay away from the more general how to be a human rules. Right, this is good hygiene, behave well with each other, don't pick fights, try to keep the focus on the game and not distracted constantly. All of these aspects are fine to include in a list of etiquette, but I don't think that that etiquette should be rolled into those house rules, as I don't believe they are unique to that particular meta or that particular group of players. I think it's important that we focus in our house rules on the way that we want the gameplay to function. Do we want our house rules to focus on the way that players are eliminated? There's people that treat Magic the Gathering, especially if they play Commander, as a sort of social experience in which people want to sit at the table for a while and play Magic. If that's the case, you don't want to knock out a player 5 minutes in. So maybe your house rules include a hard limit on how early you can eliminate players based on the bracket in which you were playing. If you were playing bracket 3, I think that's turn 7, and so you can set that as a hard rule. But now let's get into a couple of the house rules that we use. Things that we've landed on, and it's just going to be a small handful that help us enjoy our Magic game nights that much more. In my circle of friends, we have 3 house rules, and that's it. Everything else beyond this is bounded by etiquette and by the rules of the game. We'll sometimes talk about different brackets, but generally we play a little bit more freeform than that and kind of just assume everything's on the table until it isn't. But our first rule is don't apologize for winning. There's this real tendency in Magic, and I think it comes from people generally wanting to have a good time, that when they win the game, they say, oh, I'm sorry, my deck doesn't normally pop off like that. I just got really lucky. I had an early soul ring. Maybe all of the pieces came together in just the right order. Even though I mulled down to 6, it didn't matter because I had that power in play. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't hit your 4th land. It's unfortunate when that happens. That's probably why I ended up winning the game. It cheapens the experience, and it can lead to some bad feel moments between the players at the table. If you win, win graciously. Say, hey, thanks for that great game. That was a lot of fun. It was really cool to see that happen. And your opponents should do the same. When you lose, lose gracefully, say, hey, thanks for the game, that was really cool. It was awesome to see your deck pop off. I've never seen something like that happen in a bracket 2 or bracket 3 deck. It happens. Sometimes games get out of control, but it can be really cool to see that happen, and you shouldn't feel the need to apologize. And by codifying that, saying, don't apologize when you win, I think it helps encourage better behavior at the table. Our second rule that we follow is don't play with your food. The worst feeling in the world is knowing your opponent can win, but is intentionally holding back because they want the game to keep going. It is always better to wrap up the game and just start again than to know that you've technically not lost, but could have lost if your opponent had just done the thing that they can obviously do. Obviously, sometimes there's strategic reasons for keeping someone alive to help balance the table and team up against another enemy to prevent king making in a multiplayer game, or to change up the general decision points on the board in your favor. But in general, if you have the shot, take it. If you have the win, go for it. Make your opponents have that response. I think it leads to better gameplay experiences and generally better outcomes for that metagame at large. People get used to playing up, and you never want to cause people to play down. The restrictions on deck building and the restrictions on game changers and all of that should not prevent you from playing a good game of Magic. And so all of these rules are focused on leading to that good game of Magic, helping people be better players and helping those decks perform as well as they possibly can. And our third rule that we like to follow is mix it up. At the end of a game, if you won by a lot, maybe your deck is a little overpowered. Maybe it doesn't always do that. But it tends to be a good idea to switch it up anyways. Swap to a different deck, try something new. Additionally, this helps if your deck is a bit of a one-trick pony. If it always does the same thing, playing it multiple times in a row, it's just not going to be that exciting to watch it do the same thing again. And maybe your deck lost, and you want to try something different. You want to up the power level a little bit, try a different archetype that might be better suited for the table. It's always nice to be able to shake things up. And if that's not within the same pod or against the same opponent, sometimes it's switching players around, so you get a new experience. You get to experience more of the community, more of the metagame. It helps keep things balanced across all of the decks in play, rather than just that individual insular group. I think between those three rules, you help people have a better experience at the table and walk away feeling better about the way that their games went. And so that's why we use those three rules in our group. And that's it. I know there's a lot of other aspects that go into this game and some courtesy and etiquette that is mandatory to having a good experience on the table. But for us, those are a given. If they need to be spelled out, spell them out. This list can go as long as you want, but understand the more points there are, the more things that might get lost. But now, let's step into crafting our own list of rules, our own house rules for whatever metagame you happen to find yourself in. So now let's talk about how you might make your own house rules. And I know there's a lot of people that prefer not to have house rules at all. And frankly, it might not even be necessary for your group to have house rules. Perhaps you can subsist entirely on the stated rules of the game. The regular ban list, the game changers list, the general guidance of what different brackets mean. But if you are not playing in Commander, those guidelines don't necessarily exist. If you're playing 60 card decks, that heads up interaction is going to lead to some form of arms race. And by taking a note out of some of those bracket discussions in Commander, I think we can make house rules that mimic those for other formats. Maybe specifying certain archetypes on a game changers list to define a higher power and lower power bracket within that individual meta. Maybe you can specify certain strategies of play that are generally frowned upon. Some sort of extremely fast burn aggro deck in a 20 life point format might not be congruent with somebody trying to do something a little slower and clunkier at a lower power level. So by spelling these out and stating exactly what expectations you can have, it allows you to have those discussions about forming a balanced matchup on the table. Additionally, I would suggest heavily that if you are playing 60 card formats, play it in rounds of 3 with a sideboard. I think it really helps develop the game as it should be. There's this tendency to just play best of 1 when you're playing casually, but it really does change the way that Magic the Gathering functions. And by including sideboards and some of these counter strategies, you can have that better gameplay experience. Additionally, swapping opponents between different games can be a lot of fun, even if that doesn't involve setting a bracket ahead of time, as wins with no stakes don't really matter. But still, mixing it up tends to help out a lot. I'd encourage you to give it a shot if you are playing casually. Have those discussions, spell out some of those rules, and put together a small rubric for the way that you'd like that gameplay experience to function. Obviously, I think my rules are a good starting point, but you might see that a little bit differently. Maybe you see balance as the ultimate goal, and if decks are imbalanced, add a house rule saying that the player who comes out on top must switch decks, or the player that's on the bottom trades decks with the player on the top. Vary the experience a little bit. Not every playgroup wants to hand their decks to other players, but I think it can be a really fun way to experience the other side of a game state. I think there's a lot of rules you can implement about proxies and the ways that we construct our decks financially. Setting limits on how expensive cards can be or decks can be, or limits on how many proxies can be included in a deck. But maybe, if gameplay is the ultimate goal, and you want to optimize your decks as far as they'll go, regardless of the financial constraints, specify that as well. All proxies are welcome. We like to play with whatever flavor deck you ultimately come up with. I think there's a lot of ways of implementing house rules in a positive way that don't restrict players, but explicitly allow them to do things outside the norm. Specify that certain silver-bordered cards are allowed, that certain aspects of the ban list can be a little bit flexible. Specify what casual means to you. I think there's a lot of really good uses for house rules, and by simply writing those off as a way to mess with the rules of Magic, I think is an unhealthy approach in most circles. So I'd encourage you to give it a shot. If you do have house rules, I'd love to see what your list looks like, because I suspect it's a little bit different from mine. So let me know. It's been really nice talking to you.